At the 31st edition of the Conference of Montreal, the Honorable Scott Brison, Vice Chair, BMO Wealth Management, sat down with Nancy Southern AOE, a Canadian businesswoman, and the Chair and CEO of ATCO, a publicly traded company based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The two discussed the theme of leadership and purpose in turbulent times. Let's take a listen.
Welcome to Markets Plus, where leading experts from across BMO discuss factors shaping the markets, economy, industry sectors, and much more. Visit bmocm.com/Markets Plus for more episodes. The views expressed here are those of the participants and not those of BMO Capital Markets, its affiliates, or subsidiaries.
Thank you very much, Nancy. It's really super that you are doing this tonight. Order of Alberta, Order of the British Empire, and Chair and CEO of ATCO, and Executive Chair of Canadian Utilities. For some of the people in the room here, they may not know the roots of ATCO, which I 78 years ago, and they were pretty humble roots. And it's amazing what has been accomplished. So if you could just, for folks here, give a little overview about where it all started with your grandparents and your dad, and where your focuses are now, including some of the exciting new areas like modular housing.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And Scott, it's an honor to be asked to be here with all of you. So thank you very much. I'll try not to bore you. I will tell you, it is a pretty interesting Canadian story. My grandfather was a fireman, and he was actually the fire sergeant at the Air Force maintenance base in Calgary. And that was while my father was a busboy on the summer holidays and a bellhop at the Banff Springs Hotel. But when my father was in high school, his coach said, "Hey, Ron," he knew my dad really liked to kind of have a few side jobs while he was at school. "There's a guy up the road and he wants to sell a holiday trailer. Would you be interested in trying to sell it?" Okay, so they brought it home, and it was just as Turner Valley, the gas boom and discovery of Turner Valley, Black Diamond, Longview, Little Chicago, and Little New York in Alberta had begun. And people were going out trying to find their black gold. And nobody had a place to live. And so these holiday trailers became a big boom market. And sure enough, my grandmother had curbed this holiday trailer. And all of a sudden, my grandfather and my dad said, "Oh, there might be a business here." So my grandfather, who was a true entrepreneur, grade 6 education, knew that he would lose his job as a fireman if he was caught moonlighting. And so he had my dad at 17 years of age sign the incorporation papers for the Alberta Trailer Company. And that's where ATCO acronym comes from. 1947-46.
And so things have changed a little bit over the years. And today you're a leader not only in portable buildings and offices, but entire communities. You were mentioning the project in the United Arab Emirates. How big was that?
20,000 beds.
20,000 beds.
It was the largest industrial workforce camp that we had ever built. This workforce was to build Saadiyat Island, and the people came from all over. We actually built the main complex facilities. They all had to be AK-47 resistant, which is an interesting spec. So we built out of Australia, we built some in the Emirates, and we built some out of Indonesia for that project. It was quite a project. The other really interesting one is at the top of the Andes for actually Canadian-Chilean partnership copper mine at 14,000 feet elevation. And that's a 1,200 bed community.
Based on your experience, what have been advantages to having a family-controlled public company versus a more widely held one?
Well, the number one advantage is having the privilege of longer-term vision, where even though we are traded on the TSX, and quite frankly, many funds don't like us because we are principally controlled in dual-class shares. And as a result, we have a discount attached to our multiple. However, after 78 years, we've actually created significant value for our share owners because we have had the privilege of taking a very long-term view and not having to respond quarterly to the market or what analysts want. We never provide guidance for our earnings. They don't like that. And we talk about what our aspirations are. And we like to be fair and transparent, but not to the point where we're setting expectations just because of the share price. And that causes a problem. So there is disadvantage because as you continue to grow, a lot of our businesses are very capital intensive. And the larger the projects are, the greater capital that is required. But I'm very proud to say, since we acquired Canadian Utilities in 1980, so 45 years, David Del Bello and I were talking about this, we've never issued equity. And we have actually grown the value of the company. We are today outpacing the TSX return at about 11%, 9% at CU and 11% at ATCO. But I think that's the greatest advantage. Now we come to a bit of a crunch. And it's a hard decision because if you're at a discount because of principal control and you do need equity, you're selling your equity at a discount. That's a hard decision to have to make. And you also lose part of that. Not that you lose the voting shares, but you do lose total equity in having to do that. What's interesting that I'm finding today is that there is a lot of capital around, and there are a lot of new instruments that are available. And we've certainly seen privatization occurring a lot more frequently with publicly traded companies. I believe that one of the advantages we do have is that over 50% of our shareholder base is retail. And it's moms and pops, not just pension funds, not just institutional investing. It's actually households that are investing in us and believe in us. And so protecting their value, we are looking for different ways. And because there is a lot of capital out there in the world, we don't see it all here in Canada, so you have to go out searching for it. But there's some really interesting new instruments that are being used that are longer-term debt products, basically, that you pay more than you do for a loan, but can actually be treated as equity over a period of time.
Today, ESG has become a major corporate focus in recent years, but long before we had ESG, family-owned and family-controlled companies were good corporate citizens taking care of people and communities. Your father was a pioneer in terms of Indigenous partnership, and maybe tell our friends here tonight a little bit about that.
When you have limited equity to spend and you want to grow and you want to diversify your investments, partnerships are always very important. And so wherever we went, built a factory in Egypt, we had Egyptian partners. In Saudi, we had Saudi partners. Australia, we started off with Australian partners. And my dad just believed Indigenous people were true partners. If we were going to build a business in the North, and this particular business was in the Northwest Territories, and it's a very small electric utility. And that partnership with the Dene started 39 years ago. And it started off with just 9% equity, which is a lot. But it's a very unique group as well. The Dene Investment Corporation is all the Dene nations. And in those days, that was something that was really quite a remarkable thing to get all Dene nations to agree on a corporation. Today, basically 40 years later, they're 51% owners of that small utility. The other great partnership that we've had for 35 years is with the Pan-Arctic Inuit Logistics Corporation. And that's all of the Inuit communities from Labrador all the way to Alaska. And we provide all the North Warning System facilities management at all of the radar sites with these partners for 35 years. We had a little interlude of about 10. But I think one of the largest linear projects that we did was a transmission line in Alberta that we believe is the first leg for a north-south corridor, not just an east-west corridor, but a north-south corridor. And we spent 3 years in consultation, at least 3,000 individual personal meetings with the communities. We actually learned how to build the transmission line in a way that would help the caribou migration. And the elders actually taught us what to build in the right-of-way to stop the wolves, because the wolves are very smart. When the caribou go through a right-of-way, the wolves are right there waiting for them. And so they had us build all these berms and things like that inside the right-of-way. It was a tremendous project. It was built on time, actually early. We commissioned it early, on budget, $1.8 billion, not one intervention. And the Indigenous 6 communities along the line own 40% of that power line today.
There's a strong set of values in your family around community and social and corporate responsibility. How do you keep those values of your family instilled in the company as it grows, and how are you envisioning keeping those values core to ATCO, NCU, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, future generations, your children, the next generation?
The most important lesson that we learned, and that both my sister and I feel is important to transfer through our generations and throughout our company, is caring. And my dad left us with a great definition that he spent a lot of time writing on excellence. And I'll just paraphrase it: going beyond the call of duty, doing more than others expect of you, paying attention to the smallest detail, and most of all, caring. And so it's not always about a win, it's about a win-win. It has to be mutually good for everyone involved. And I believe that ripples through the DNA of our companies, and that we really do care about each other. And that is the responsibility I was given, is to care about not just the people today, but the future generations.
So, Nancy, it's a new government. It's only been there a fairly short time. You've known Mark Carney for a while. How do you feel about the new government, and how are you feeling, and how is the community, I'm saying the Alberta and business community, feeling in these early days?
There is a great optimism. The Prime Minister reached out almost immediately and spent a lot of time with us in industry, an inordinate amount of time with us. No Prime Minister in a very, very long time has taken the time to actually have a conversation with us. Obviously, the proof is going to be in the pudding. We know it's all about the attention to detail, what's going to happen. But I think C5 is a really good step forward. I believe federally, we have got the right man in the right job. And so there's great optimism. The one danger that I am a bit concerned about is nation-building projects require us to debottleneck our major infrastructure. We must decongest our ports. We must decongest our railroads. My sense is that there should be some big wins to show that Canada, it means what the Prime Minister says. We mean what we say. And we're going to get things done, and we are going to be a superpower. But in order to be a superpower, we have to have the infrastructure. And for me, that's the number one thing that the federal government has control over and can build itself without competing projects. That's when all of us will be able to compete for export, for new projects, for increased productivity and investing in ourselves. I worry that the national interest projects, a few, I think there were 5 on the list that will be fast-tracked. But if you think about how hard it is to get a project to that stage, and a lot of times the civil service doesn't understand. It actually takes years for a big project to put this all together. But just like in our industries, that middle management is really hard to get through. It's really hard to change. And I worry that that will be the most difficult problem for the Prime Minister to solve. And so those national interest projects may get through, some are pretty well advanced, may get through. At the same time, regulations are going to be tweaked to get them through. But what about the rest of the projects? And so if we have a 2-tiered system, so you want to build a small cogen electricity producing plant. You want to build a little munitions center for defense. Those projects are going to be the most important part of building our economy. Not the really big ones will give us the early low-hanging fruit. But we need to have an equal level playing field for all of our projects so that we really can build the momentum in this country.
What was the period or experience in your whole career that had the greatest impact on shaping you as a leader?
You know, the best learning I had, I was only 39 when I came on the BMO board. And I was put straight away into the risk committee, which at the time wasn't a big deal. The audit committee was a lot more serious than the risk committee until we got to the GFC. And I can remember being in Chicago, Harris Bank, and we had a presentation. And I have to say that was, for me, the best lesson in not being worried about saying, I don't understand this. Can you please walk me through line by line so that I can reconcile what you're actually talking about? That was the best lesson I could have ever learned, was to not be afraid to ask the question.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks for listening. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. For more episodes, visit bmocm.com/marketsplus.
For BMO disclosures, please visit bmocm.com/podcast/disclaimer.